Hello and welcome to yet another episode of Tai'Shar, a Wheel of Time podcast. I'm Will.
I'm Sam.
As dictated by our notes, I'm now going to sing Strangers in the Night and Edelweiss. Wait a second.
We have a Google Docs, and sometimes we see each other taking notes.
Right. And so we'll add little things to them. Yeah, welcome to an off-topic episode. We did one of these a few months ago, and we've been looking for an opportunity to do another one.
And we took the opportunity when neither of us finished our notes.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. Next week, we'll be redoing The Great Hunt, and I'm looking forward to that more now that I've started taking notes because, as we said, it's probably, I think, both of our favorite book in the first trilogy. Mm-hmm. And it's just a lot of fun. And actually going back through it, I've been noticing things that I didn't catch on my second reread.
Yeah, same.
I'm like, oh, this is awesome.
Yeah, you start thinking, well, this could definitely be in the show, and that could be really cool.
Right, exactly. So I'm looking forward to that here next week. Before we dive into our off-topic things, I do want to remind you guys, as we talked about last week, that we have opened up the opportunity for all of you to support us via donation. You can just go to tsmpodcast.com and click the little donate button up there if you choose to support us in that way. And if not, we're still glad that you're with us.
Yeah, definitely.
There's reoccurring donations. If you want to give like a one-time donation, just select reminder, so it'll just remind you the next time, and you could like select yearly, and it might remind you again next year, but it won't automatically take it out. So anyway, and that just helps us pay for things like hosting, and I'm trying to get a new laptop so I can get shows out in a timely manner. If you want to hear the details about that, check our last episode out. If you're willing to help out that way, that'd be awesome.
For sure.
So, anyway, in this off-topic episode, Sam and I both wanted to talk about a recent Netflix series.
Several recent Netflix series.
Actually, yes, a few. There was one in particular that came up in our discussion a few weeks ago. Did you finish Shadow and Bone?
No, because of Jupiter's Legacy, I didn't. But I don't know. I'm like 4 or 5 in. It's okay if you spoil it. I'm not too worried. I mean,
okay.
I'll probably will still watch it at some point, but I'm not worried.
So let's start off, and I'll go ahead and call spoilers.
Yeah, that's probably smart.
We're going to say spoilers for Jupiter's Legacy. We'll go ahead and throw that out there.
Yeah.
Spoilers for Shadow and Bone. But here's the thing. I'm saying spoilers because I know some people are very sensitive.
Yeah, we won't intentionally say this is the ending and here's exactly what happened. Right.
I'm just giving you that warning so that if we say something that you're like, I didn't want to know that.
Sorry.
Yeah, we're telling you now. I'm not going to give away the ending. I might say, hey, there is a surprise at this point or whatever.
Yeah.
So anyway, so let's first talk about Shadow and Bone.
Yeah.
I haven't read the books. Have you?
No, I've not. I understand they're YA,
right.
Which is exactly. Let me just say this out of the gate. This is my main takeaway. I enjoyed it, and then also was very aware I am not the target demographic. The moment I was made aware I'm not the target demographic is when the protagonist is learning to use magic and can't progress because she's upset because she hasn't received any letters from her kind of sort of boyfriend.
Right. Yes.
I'm like, okay, this is just, I am not the target demographic here. I'm no way saying that this is poor writing or anything. It's just, I'm not the one who should be moved in this moment.
Yeah. It's funny because I'm obviously not either, but I have often read, of course, I read Hunger Games.
I read the last one, weirdly. I didn't read all the other ones.
Oh, yeah?
And I didn't mind it. I didn't mind the books.
I'd actually argue that of the YA stuff that has come out in the last decade, that Hunger Games is probably going to endure.
Yeah, it's certainly the one that's had the most reach, into wider popular culture, certainly.
And I also think there's some actual literary value in them.
I mean, it is. Hunger Games was derivative of that other
Battle Royale.
Yeah, but it's okay. I mean, I think it did its own thing enough in a way that it kind of set itself apart well enough. I think it's fine.
Yeah, and I mean, and there's actually some parts where she uses some interesting imagery and
Yeah, totally.
gets into a little bit of social commentary here and there. So that's why I say I think there's some staying power with it. Less so with the Divergent series, which I also read and enjoyed, but more like the first one felt interesting and somewhat original, and I mean, it felt a lot like Hunger Games, but it still had its own kind of flavor to it.
I've tried a couple of YA series. There was one Brandon Sanderson wrote. It was like Skyward, and then I tried, was it Red Rising or something Rising? I can't remember the name of it. There's another one. It's going to come to me later. But like both of them have that like first person.
Oh yeah.
Very, centered on a protagonist who's a teenager, obviously.
Yeah.
And like you can tell pretty quick that it's YA, Right. And I don't know why I just tend to like, once I realize that, especially it's all about expectations. Like going in, if I don't realize it, like with the Brandon Sanderson thing, I got it, I got the Kindle book from the library and started reading. And it's like, oh, wait a minute. And like, I want to not do that. I want to not close myself off to things.
Sure.
But it's just like a gut reaction. Like, oh, this isn't what I thought it was.
I know exactly what you're talking about. So I got suckered into, and if anybody has read these books, they'll laugh if they have. If you haven't, then you'll just be like, oh, okay. So I heard an ad on a podcast I was listening to for a fantasy series called The Black Witch Chronicles. Mm-hmm. And they described it as Harry Potter kind of like grown up, though, like because it takes place in a university setting in a magical world. And so I was like, I'll give this a shot.
Yeah.
Because Sam and I were Harry Potter generation. Like,
totally. Mm-hmm.
We were like Harry's age for the first couple of books. And then, of course, by the time they were done, we were in college, still reading them. And that really was, Harry Potter is why we have YA, really. It was
that's true.
Success of Harry Potter that was like, hey, this is a huge crossover. You've got adults reading it. Mm-hmm. And reading it to their kids, and so that was where that became a new kind of target of kind of a hey, we can find stuff that parents will let their kids read, but also we're going to have parents actually interested in the story too.
And for Christmas we got our kids like these big, beautiful illustrated versions of the first 3 Harry Potter books, and it's so cool. Like yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I saw those on a bookshelf at a bookstore when I was actually with my parents. My mom was like, "Hey, would you want these for Christmas?" I was kind of like, I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like if it was just me, it'd be like, well, I've read them. I don't need that. But for my kids, it's kind of cool.
No, but I'm saying like I kind of didn't want to admit it, but I was like,
right, fair enough.
Yeah,
definitely do. Yeah,
yeah, I'd love to have those. It was actually at that same used bookstore that I found a really good deal on some hardbacks of The Wheel of Time.
Oh, nice. Heck yeah.
Which I actually don't have many physical copies, Wheel of Time books.
Yeah.
So
we're finally to the ones I have again. Like I gave away some, I lost some, but from Winter's Heart on, I have mostly hardbacks of the later books. Yeah.
Well, I'd like to get a full set of the hardbacks so I can do the Juniper books. They're dust jackets that make the mural when you have them all in order next to another.
Cool. Yeah. Rock on.
So anyway, Black Witch, before we get back to Shadow and Bone. Black Witch is what I would describe as Harry Potter. Yes, there is definitely a part of it that feels a little bit like Harry Potter as far as it's taking place at a school, but it's mixed with Twilight.
Oh, wow.
And you talk about not being the target audience.
Yeah. Oh man.
Oof. Like I went through the whole thing because I was like,
well, I'm committed now.
Yeah. It's not bad. It's not like when I say it's mixed with Twilight, I don't mean like it's lame. And I'm sorry for any of our listeners who like Twilight. I think most, though, of my friends who were fans of the series.
You gotta acknowledge it's awful. Yeah. I'm sorry. Like, okay, I just love. There's a Stephen King quote. I can't remember where he said it. Maybe it was on Twitter.
Yeah, I know exactly.
Where he says the difference between J.K. Rowling and Stephanie Meyer is that J.K. Rowling doesn't write crap. Oh man, I went to see the second or third Twilight movie in theaters with my wife, and Good times.
I've seen the Twilight movies because of Riff Track.
Oh yeah.
The guys from Mystery Science Theater 3000 can download these commentaries where, as you're watching the movie, they'll make fun of them, and that's the only way I've ever watched them. It's actually pretty enjoyable that way.
Oh yeah, no, that sounds great. I would definitely do that.
The element that makes it like Twilight is it is very much about the relationships.
And let's be honest here, Shadow and Bone has some of that.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that's all that Shadow and Bone is, but it definitely has that. That's a very key piece of it.
I'd almost say like that has become a hallmark of YA. Now,
yeah, it certainly feels that way.
Black Witch feels like they're going for a little older than the typical YA audience. Like they are trying to get
the people who actually read Twilight when they
like people who read Twilight and Harry Potter when they were coming out, and are now in their 20s, maybe even 30s.
Yeah.
I recommended it to a friend of mine who enjoyed both Twilight and Harry Potter. I was like, you need to read this. You need to read this. You're going to love it. And I was I finally bought her a copy of the book and gave it to her, and she was like, you're right. I totally love this. and that's part of the reason why I bring it up. I know in our audience, we probably have people who would really enjoy Black Witch Chronicles.
Yeah, I mean, looking at the dust jacket, I mean, I wouldn't have known it was YA or that it was like Twilight. I mean,
yeah,
give it a shot, probably.
It's bad at all.
You're just not the target audience.
Yeah. Here's what's funny is I got through the whole thing, and at the end, this has been a Harlequin teen production. And I'm like,
dang.
Okay.
You got punked.
Yeah.
Oh, dang. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense.
That's what's happening here.
But anyway, that was one that I got into. I was reminded of that as I was watching Shadow and Bone.
Okay.
So let me start off and say, here are the things that I really did enjoy about Shadow and Bone.
Please.
Number one, for the show.
Yeah.
I haven't read the books.
Same.
But I understand actually that these are a pretty good representation of the books from people who have.
I mean, Netflix wanted this to be like their Game of Thrones, right? I mean, that's what I've heard people say that. I don't know.
Obviously a different audience, but
right. But like the production quality, and that sort of thing.
I guess that'll be the first thing I need to say that I liked about it is that pretty much every Netflix show I watch, there's some element of it that makes me go, oh, that's where they saved money.
Yeah.
Whether it's some of the acting isn't great or
whether they have cast Anthony Mackie in yet another show.
Right.
Or movie like, dude, you work a lot, man. Like they must have gotten some kind of deal or else he just
that's what I wonder if he had like a certain like number of episodes of whatever with them
you wonder that. I was wondering the other day when I saw was it yet another the actress from Watchmen, the lady who plays the FBI agent, she's in Mayor of Easttown. And also, she's starring in the show called Hacks. I'm like, man, and you see that a lot. You'll see one actor that's in a bunch of stuff for one network, or the chick from Handmaid's Tale is in another show on Hulu. Like, do that. They do that. Like, I guess they sign some deal and they, get a bunch of shows at once or something. But
right. Well, and some of them see that. Some of them may have exclusivity deals,
sure,
in some cases, or some measure of that. They can't do other shows, or at least shows for other networks or whatever.
Some type of show, maybe.
Right, unless there was some pre-existing thing, like in the case of Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
I was going to say, otherwise Anthony Mackie's a Netflix man now.
Looking at all these different shows, there's typically on Netflix, even like the shows that I really enjoy, there's typically something that says, okay, this is a smaller scale.
Yeah, like Arrested Development, the fact that it was all like scenes. Was that scheduling? I know it was part of it, but
it was all kind of like cut together. Another one I was thinking of that's, I guess, in kind of a similar vein of Shadow and Bone. I know I'm not the target audience for this, but quite often I do enjoy teen shows. Is Fate, the Winx saga, which is
haven't even heard of it.
Okay, it's totally based off of like a little girls cartoon show apparently, but apparently also has like nothing to do with that show in reality other than some characters have the same names.
Gotcha.
It's rated MA, so it's not like
weird.
Strange. I really don't know. I'm kind of confused as to who they were trying to get with this.
Yeah.
Like who the audience actually was intended. But it's a fantasy series and it's well done. And actually the effects are pretty good. I like the actors in it. I think the writing isn't bad. The only thing about it that makes it feel like a Netflix show is the scale. Everything feels like
Smaller.
It's smaller.
Yeah.
It takes place at a school, very Harry Potter derivative.
Yeah.
But there's only like 3 teachers at this school.
Right.
You know,
now that you say that, Shadow and Bone, I mean, I know this is probably not the point you were making, but Shadow and Bone, you never have like the giant crowds. I mean, there will be crowds, but they're never like Game of Thrones crowd.
I feel like they did more of that.
That's where I was going, is that I feel like you were making the opposite point, and I agree with you that they were, in this case at least, trying to do more of that. But it's still not to that HBO scale.
Yeah. It's not there. And then of course
because they're just putting out so much more content than HBO. Yeah. So much more content.
And so much of it is mediocre.
Yeah, really. Throwing spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks. That's been Netflix's kind of MO for their whole existence.
Yeah, no.
And they've had some winners. Absolutely, they've had some winners. Stranger Things, who would have known?
We could talk all about Stranger Things and how awesome it is that it pays homage to all these great nerdy things from the 80s. It's so much fun. And that's one that I don't look at that and see and say like, oh, this is where they save the money.
No, it's perfect. I really like exactly how they've done.
I think mainly what they did is that it's exactly what it needs to be.
Yeah.
The scale is right. It doesn't feel too small. It doesn't feel they're having to kind of stretch their budget out.
Right.
While they have a handful of actors that are recognizable, I understand Sean Astin actually works for almost anything these days. I think Winona Ryder, ever since the incident a while back when she was caught shoplifting, hasn't gotten a ton of work. So, and then other than them, you have mostly no names.
The guy from the last season Billy, I don't know, the lifeguard, he was a Power Ranger.
Right.
He's great. He was great in it. He was great in Power Rangers, and he was great in Stranger Things.
He was in the new Power Rangers.
I was going to say, I know last episode I was disparaging the television show. I really liked the new movie, even though I like seeing it. I was like, is this going to be like Iron Man? I kind of feel like it's like Iron Man, but I liked it. I don't know.
I thoroughly enjoyed it too. I was kind of sad when it sounds like they're not going to be continuing it, because I was like, I want to see Tommy in this version.
Apparently, I keep meaning to read this. Apparently, the comic book that is like an ongoing comic book by Boom of the original Power Rangers is really good. I've been meaning to like just pick up a trade paperback and check it out. I've heard repeatedly that it's just excellent.
Well, go figure. I know we're kind of all over the place with
of course we are,
but
that's okay.
That's the point of this episode. What I'm getting at is the production value.
We're going to get to your first point here at some point. Yeah.
Yes, the production value for Shadow and Bone is, I think, probably about the best that Netflix has done.
Yeah, you figure they've probably spent more on this than dang near any show. I mean,
right. I mean, the effects are solid. Very rarely do you stop and go, oh, that's a little chintzy. That took me out of the moment. No, they're pretty good. Gosh, the sets and the costumes, the art direction, all of that, props, everything. It's a very solid show from a production design standpoint.
Right.
So that's one thing that I really do enjoy about it. And that is great because it is based off of a really interesting take on the fantasy world, where, we kind of talked about this in our previous episode, the show update, how kind of what makes Wheel of Time interesting is that it's not the stereotypical medieval fantasy with just a European bent, that there's a lot of Eastern influences in the aesthetic.
Yeah, they're definitely not medieval.
Right. The time period is like just on the cusp of an almost industrial.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's kind of interesting. Well, Shadow and Bone is straight up the industrial era. It's a very clearly a steampunk aesthetic, but also, and this is really, to me, the most fascinating thing, because I haven't run across anything quite like this, but it's like pre-Bolshevik era Russia that it's that it's based off of, rather than being Western Europe.
Yeah, I love that they sort of, and maybe you're going to make this point.
No, go ahead.
Maybe I love that they make the point that magic users are sort of being rendered obsolete a little bit by guns.
Right.
They're just somebody else that gets shot at some point.
Yeah.
One of the soldiers says that about the Second Army.
Right.
They're just, and then like at one point the dude is in the tundra with his buddies looking for a stag. I don't know anybody's names. Anyway, and some barbarians like shoot him with a Gatling gun. Like, it wouldn't have mattered if he had been able to throw fireballs. That dude had a Gatling gun. Like, it was one of those old school Gatling guns. It has a crank, but it's still a Gatling gun.
Right. Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I think Daniel Green of Fantasy News, he said it. I like that guns are guns.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, like a person who is a capable gunslinger. And that actually, there is a component. So like Jesper.
Yeah, he's just a fun character.
But he's also somebody who is a fan of this series is probably going to be very frustrated that we don't know the lore term.
Right.
You know, one of the types of magic involves metal and being able to, kind of work with metals and everything. And
they have like a weird name for their magic users. What is it?
Grisha.
What in the world? What does that mean?
I don't know. It reminds me.
It's like greasers. Makes me think of The Outsiders.
It makes me think of geisha.
Yeah.
Which actually I think could have been intentional. There's kind of a thing where a geisha is kind of like brought in and treated real nice and everything, but they're used.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
I think,
okay. Maybe that is
there may be an intentional homage kind of there, or whatever you want to call it, a reference. One of the magic users tends to be kind of in tune with metal things and mechanical things. People who tend to be capable of building and inventing things, but also in the case of Jesper is a really great gunslinger.
Right.
Has a supernatural ability to hit a target,
shoot a bullet and like bounce off of a wall and hit somebody.
Right, which is cool. It's an interesting thing. I mean,
that's very Mistborn-esque.
Right, yeah. It's not that it's never been done, but it is. We don't see it as often.
I would really wonder when this came out compared to Mistborn, the books, because Mistborn, the second set of books came was very much in the industrial era.
Yeah, I think it's been pretty recent.
Yeah.
Why don't you?
I should. Yeah.
You go Google
cast
that.
aspersions.
I think it's pretty recent though.
2012.
Yeah. So when was Mistborn's second era?
Let's see.
Because was it more recent than that, or?
No. Let's see.
I mean, I know first era was a while ago now.
Dadgummit, why am I not I'm having trouble finding this? Alloy of Law. Written in 2011. So it's just before.
So
I mean, it wasn't like he had like a lock on
right
these things, but certainly there's some similarities there.
Right. I mean, I don't even know if that was the first time that idea had really been introduced.
Oh, sure, probably not. There's nothing new under the sun.
Right. Anyway, I do like the way magic users are handled in this.
I'm with you.
It's a soft magic system, but not totally soft. It has some clear things. Here's the thing, and this is where I'm not going to get into specifics, but in the last episode, there's a thing that happens that up to that point, I would have said the magic system was somewhat harder. Like there's some clear rules, like, okay, here's this and the limits, and this happens and that happens.
Right.
And then it has a thing that happens, and a character is able to change something because they realize something.
Like the power was in them all along kind of thing.
Basically, yeah.
Oh, jeez.
and that's where, to me, as far as the story goes, I wasn't like super hyped about it at any point, but I was enjoying it kind of up until that point, and it kind of lost me a little bit.
Sure. Yeah, if it's not consistent,
where it felt a little bit like, okay, so you just
threw away all your rules because you wanted to do something different.
And what it reminded me of is like in Smallville back in the day, how Clark would not react to kryptonite until he could see it most of the time.
Right.
And it was always about the plot working out. Like, yeah, dude, if he had that kryptonite in his pocket, then it wouldn't have mattered. Anyway.
Right.
It felt a little bit like that, where it was like, well, this is what needed to happen for the plot. And that's what fantasy gets railed on all the time for.
Yeah, the rules are bendy and fuzzy.
Right. Because up to that point, like I said, the magic system felt like a fairly hard magic system.
Yeah.
And it just softened way up at the end.
That's unfortunate.
And that may be my misunderstanding, I want to say, of something.
Listeners, if you're fans of these books and you have some knowledge you'd like to drop on us, I'm here for it. I'm interested. Yeah. I'm just skeptical.
No, absolutely. And you may say either I misunderstood it or they didn't represent it well in the series. And if you watch it, I think you'll know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I'm still planning to finish it. I'll do that.
I like the general premise, the setup, having this zone that is, full of darkness that is almost impossible to cross and everything. That's intriguing. The way it's portrayed in the series, I think, was done really well. It looks visually, it looks great.
Oh yeah, that is true. The magic is done well. The sets are amazing. I'm with you on the production values in general are just very good.
Right. What you're saying about the, once you get into the relationships and things, I mean, this is the thing something that people miss about the strength of Harry Potter is that the relationships were a side dish.
It was not the main point for many books, in part because he was so little when they started. Right. The first book, he's just not even on their radar because it's a kid.
And even when they kind of come to the forefront, it's more like
it's not the point of that book.
Yeah, they're all in the midst of these adventures, and
they're all sort of going through adolescence together and just trying to figure out being awkward. And it just feels like a bunch of kids growing up. It doesn't feel like this. Yeah.
I don't know, maybe some of our listeners will be different. It's one of the things that can be a weakness in YA as like a common weakness.
I mean, Hunger Games certainly had the same.
Right. Hunger Games had it, elements of relationship stuff in the Divergent series. So to me, it's kind of a thing where people almost act like this has got to be a big focus. Mm-hmm. And I'd be more curious to see if fantasy sci-fi YA series, if somebody challenged themselves to say, we're not going to do a relationship in this one, or at least we're not going to set one up in the first book even.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What if it happens, it's going to be
organically,
much more, yes, exactly, natural feeling than, okay, here's the very obvious love triangle.
Yeah, that's exactly what it felt like. Especially when the one dude is so much older. Come on.
Yeah.
It's weird. I mean, and the actor is literally...
He's 39.
Yeah, he is. He's 39.
And she's
25 or 23 or something like that. Oh, come on, man.
Yeah.
Why do we have to do that?
Yeah, and Prince Caspian.
Right, that's so funny. He looks like Jaime Lannister from Game of Thrones. It's not the same actor.
Yeah. He
definitely has that look going. The hair.
Well, it's funny to me that he's the biggest name in the whole series, and he's not a name. I mean, he's
right. Oh, Prince Caspian.
He's barely a face, and maybe where they save their money, so to speak. But all the actors are solid.
Yeah, for sure.
You don't have a bad performance. The characters are likable and all that. So
yeah, for sure.
Anyway, any other thoughts on Shadow and Bone?
No, I think we should just go ahead and jump right back into the other Netflix show, Jupiter's Legacy. I keep trying to say Jupiter Rising. Let's talk about Red Rising.
Yeah, Jupiter Ascending.
Yeah, Jupiter Ascending.
Isn't that it?
Jupiter Ascending. That strange
film. From the Wachowskis. That was
oh man, what a romp that was.
Yeah. I mean,
and a fever dream.
Yeah, there's a handful of people who will tell you, "Oh, that movie really got shortchanged. That was a really good movie."
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, I saw a lot of people trying to say hey, original sci-fi just can't get any traction anymore because of all pre-existing properties, and this was a real tragedy that this didn't get the attention it deserved. And I heard that all before I actually got around to watching it. I was okay, I'll give it a shot.
It's so weird. Just looking at I remember Mila Kunis was in it, Channing Tatum, and Eddie Redmayne. Those are the three.
Right.
But also Sean Bean, Vanessa Kirby from The Crown, Terry Gilliam. I think I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
It's so weird. It's
it's got a crazy cat. The cast is great.
It does. Apparently Halle Berry is in it at some point.
It's a
strange film.
Strange movie. Had some good ideas, but I feel like it took a really big swing.
It did, and missed.
Yeah. I appreciate original sci-fi. I mean, obviously I watched it. I'll check it.
I just don't have a lot of appetite for it. I love science fiction in the literary form.
Sure.
I don't know, man. I like all the Netflix shows. I just haven't gotten through any of them.
I'll watch fantasy faster than I'll watch sci-fi. First of all,
yeah, I hear you.
I'll watch fantasy or superhero stuff.
Superhero stuff. We're getting around to that.
Sci-fi, I would probably read it before I would watch it. Or
it's like it's almost all I read, other than when I'm not reading like Wheel of Time. Honestly, like looking at my Goodreads, like everything I've read this year has been sci-fi. Yeah. But yeah, in TV and movie form, I just have low tolerance for it because there's so much that isn't good. I mean, really, that's just the.
I think world building in sci-fi and the visual component, that and having it not feel so otherworldly that you just cannot relate.
Yeah, for sure.
I think is difficult because sometimes with sci-fi things starts to fall apart. Like, but why don't they just, and of course that happens with fantasy too. So that's really any speculative fiction can have that.
Right. When you start getting into the realm of magic and technology that's like magic. Yeah.
Right.
For sure.
Basically. And I mean, I guess to me, the thing with sci-fi that is why I prefer fantasy, and why also, by the way, I will argue that Star Wars is fantasy and not sci-fi.
Of course it is, yeah.
Is that sci-fi tends to be more dour.
It does, yeah. There are strains of sci-fi that are more optimistic, but there is, the Gene Roddenberrys of the world.
Right, exactly.
But there is, especially recently, been kind of an influx of more dystopian rather than utopian approaches to things. So that's fair. I mean, I definitely think that's true. But superheroes, it's funny. It really seems like it has become, I can't remember where I read this, it's become a genre like Westerns, where it is like a framing device by which you can tell other stories.
I actually have said this for years. I'll say this is, like it or not, this is the success of the MCU. They figured this out early.
They did,
because
they were telling other stories. Yeah, they were telling other types of stories in superhero worlds.
Yeah. Ant-Man is a heist movie, and the Winter Soldier is an espionage thriller. And,
right.
And so you can go down the list of some of these different that are like subgenres that they're actually telling inside of the superhero genre.
It's funny to me that a lot of these superhero shows and movies that are not Marvel and DC end up, and this is because of the source material the comics that they use, they end up emulating DC. And it's like, I guess it's just so easy to, it's so easy to reach for the Justice League, for Batman, Superman, the Trinity, Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman. They're so iconic. And so like doing a variation on that in order to tell your own story, it's like you immediately, you see the superheroes floating down with the capes and you see the three of them or however many. You're like, oh, we know a lot of things already. We assume a lot of things already.
Right.
And that, of course, is the case in are not Jupiter Ascending, Jupiter's Legacy. And also, and I would say at the same time, it recently released Invincible on Amazon. And I want to talk about these two shows at the same time because I really think it's a crime that Invincible is a cartoon starring J.K. Simmons. I mean, he's got some big names in it. But so it's a cartoon, so it hasn't gotten as much press. But in my opinion, much better show.
Oh, yeah?
Much better show.
I didn't finish it.
Oh man, I love it, and I was having trouble getting through Jupiter. Honestly, I really was not my thing, and Invincible was. But it's funny because they're both like
they're similar,
emulating DC. Yeah,
I think part of what you're seeing when you're saying like people are emulating DC is Invincible and Jupiter's Legacy and The Boys.
The Boys, that's the other one.
Are all telling a slightly more what I think the showrunners would see as a slightly more realistic take on the classic superheroes in a modern day. So,
and take it or leave it, the classic superheroes really are Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman. I mean, that's we now love Captain America, Iron Man, and Thor, but 20 years ago, I mean, people who knew who they were, but they were not iconic in the way that Superman was. Just weren't. And now, sure. Robert Downey as Iron Man, absolutely memorable, iconic, etc. But 20 years ago, it was Michael Keaton and Christopher Reeves,
Right. Or Dean Cain. Come on.
Dean Cain, there you go.
That's really, I in a lot of ways, I think
Linda Carter, is that right? Linda,
yeah.
The original Wonder Woman. Yeah.
Here's the thing. I feel like Marvel, to some degree, now I know some people who aren't as big a fan of the MCU might disagree,
Mhm.
but to some degree, the strength of Marvel, of the comics and the movies, is that they already have enough of a self-awareness and okay, but what if superheroes were real?
Yeah, that
As an
was
element.
always something that Stan Lee emphasized, I
Right.
think, from the
Yeah,
the DNA of these characters. I mean, someone like Spider-Man, a guy who
right,
always is struggling to pay his bills and,
right.
like has all the normal people problems, that
Yeah,
Superman just didn't have,
yeah,
like generally at one point. Now, I mean, I think at some point DC sort of realized they needed to do that and did,
right,
and have implemented that in a lot of more recent comics. But even today, you see DC doing these sweeping kind of like universe bending events, and they're not as apt to zoom in.
right.
And I mean, that's not fair. I mean, Scott Snyder, I think, has done a really good job with Batman and a bunch of characters to really tell some interesting stories. But that is that from the very beginning of some of the genesis of some of these characters in the Marvel universe, that was always a very key part of it, and the reason why they were so successful.
I think that's part of why it's a little more interesting to pose these questions around the DC universe, because
Sure.
essentially the DC kind of type characters, we haven't seen them as much in a less than idealized version. Now, lately,
Especially in like the movies and TV shows,
right,
right?
now,
Like in the comics, they've totally have, but
yeah,
yeah, I think
yeah,
that the movies and TV shows just haven't caught up to that. Yeah.
right. Now, lately, we've gotten a lot darker in the DC world too,
Yeah,
but
right.
that's,
In some of the wrong ways.
right, yeah, or tried to, and it's,
Hmm.
not quite panned out.
And
But
that's part of it also, is that Marvel has just stuck the landing so well generally
right,
that like there hasn't been like an opening to do this sort of, to that
right,
sort of satire. I mean, I'm sure it's coming. Give
yeah.
it another 10 or 15 years and we'll be there.
Yeah, and but I think part of what makes it interesting is there's no doubt the DC superheroes are gods,
Yes, indeed.
and
Indeed.
so it's kind of like,
Benevolent gods. Yeah.
right, yeah. So it's kind of like asking the question, like Boys is saying, okay, what if there were really people who had this kind of power,
Godlike power. What would they
right?
do?
They would probably actually be basically evil, or at least,
Sociopaths.
yeah,
Yeah.
self-serving,
Mhm.
and they wouldn't be concerned with other people. It would be corporations would take advantage of it and figure
Yeah,
out way to leverage it, yada yada yada.
it makes me think about Bill Gates
Yeah,
this week. It's like you never meet your heroes or whatever. Like you hear about something in Bill Gates' personal life or Elon Musk, or I mean,
right,
I don't necessarily want to compare those two, but Jeff Bezos had marital affairs and stuff. It's like, these are people who were incredibly successful, the most successful people on earth.
right,
To some degree, there was always this kind of like hero worship of someone like Bill Gates, especially Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, for crying out loud.
right,
He's
yeah,
doing literally wonderful things, and then you find out that they're human, that they've
right,
had some skeletons in their closet, or they've
right,
made mistakes, whatever, and so yeah, I think that there was an element of unreality when it comes to Superman and
mhm,
Batman and Wonder Woman, that was
yeah,
sort of ripe
yeah,
for satire, for exploring in a different way, and it necessarily has to be characters that are different, and from Invincible, Omni-Man instead of
right,
Superman, or from Jupiter's Legacy, the Utopian. Like,
right.
it's just nudge nudge, wink wink, like we know who this really is.
Right. It's that question. It's like, okay, so what if people had godlike powers? Would they be good people really? Or would they,
Or would they be like the Homelander from The Boys?
right, who's, yeah, essentially just a sociopath.
Uh-huh.
And it's interesting. And I guess I'm not a fan of The Boys.
Oh, I love The Boys. I mean,
Yeah.
it is over the top violence and all kinds of stuff, but it just seems so believable to me. I mean,
Yeah.
that someone like Homelander, and just seeing him having the American flag on his back, and going to like he went to like a church revival and was like preaching, and then going and murdering somebody, and like
Yeah.
he's just, you could totally see somebody being like this.
To me, The Boys is so cynical.
It really is. It's so bleak and dark and like, oh my
And
gosh, these are awful, awful, awful
I mean,
people.
it's like nihilistic, but has
And
this.
that's like signature Garth Ennis, you know?
Yeah,
Like,
it takes what to me is the purpose of superhero as a genre of if you will literature,
mhm.
um, is the idealized human, is like
Sure, sure.
what if we could be better.
And I think, and for me, I think it makes it that much better in the undermining of that.
Sure,
You know?
and I mean, and that's why that's why it's interesting. That's why it's found an audience.
Yeah.
This, I guess, what I'm getting at is, obviously we're of different opinions, and that's fine.
Hmm.
The reason why I liked connecting more with Jupiter's Legacy than I did with The Boys is because it had a strong dose of that. Okay, yeah, but what if they were real people?
Yeah.
But it doesn't have the total cynicism
The total bleakness. Yeah. Like
of
the Superman character hasn't gone all the way to being a sociopath. He
right,
actually is trying to be Superman. It's
right.
just hard. It's harder.
Right, exactly. And the other thing that I guess I find intriguing about it is that it's kind of a little more even keeled of, kind of the cynicism of The Boys with
Mhm. Meter
wanting that
doses.
wanting that idealized, yeah, but what if we could be better? What if we could,
Hmm.
looking towards an ideal, having an example that you're like, this is what we look to, a standard that's like, this is the kind of, which, is also in a lot of ways the idea of royalty back
Sure,
in
sure.
the days when that was
Yeah, no,
more common.
I don't disagree with you at all on this. We disagree on The Boys, but I don't disagree with you on this. That I all of the stuff pertaining to superheroes in Jupiter's Legacy, I loved. I had no problem with that. I was watching this with my wife, and what I didn't love was the extensive flashback scene to the 20s and 30s or the
Yeah,
20s, with like going to the island and like
yeah,
his dead dad talking to him like this is wholly unnecessary and really stops the plot dead for me. It just did not
yeah,
work. I really like my wife didn't even finish watching it. She's like, this is not what we signed up for. This is the classic Netflix slowdown in the
yeah,
middle of the series, and it really messed it up for me. And the last episode was a great payoff. Loved it. I needed the whole series to be like that, though. The whole season to be like that.
mhm,
And it just really the whole like have one episode be the flashback to
yeah.
where his dad dies and go to the island and get your powers and all that stuff. But don't have it be half the show, man.
No, I can agree with that. I think
Uh,
if they had all put it into one episode and
yeah.
given you the whole origin
Just give us a
story,
montage or something, man.
that tells the whole
Golly.
story at once, that probably
You
would
would
have
have
been it.
had more time to develop the modern day cast. I mean, because there was a
Yeah,
lot of those the young guys. I wanted more about his son, more about the Teen Titan group.
right,
Like we didn't
for
get a
sure.
chance. Like that was
Yeah.
my
When they
thing.
focus a lot on his daughter,
Yeah, that was unpleasant.
yeah, I wanted to care more about her than I found
She
myself
was
caring.
awful.
Yeah, she just
She
seemed
was
like
just awful.
we needed more demonstration of his failings as a father
Yeah, right. It mostly
to
seemed like he was like, "Hi, I'm trying to be here," and she's like, "I'm gonna go do some drugs."
right, and she just kept saying, "You weren't there for me,"
Like, well, I'm
and
here now, man. Like,
your dad's Superman. I mean, he's saving people's lives.
yeah,
Kind of like you're saying. I would have liked to have either gotten better development from all of them.
yeah.
I'm with you. Now I didn't dislike the flashbacks. I enjoyed them, but I can also get behind needing to consolidate them into one episode because
It
it
just seems
does.
so weird. Like it's got this Cthulhuan, like
Yes,
Lovecraftian thing. They even mention Lovecraft at one point, which is
right.
confusing.
Yeah,
And then they get to Jupiter or whatever, and it's
yeah,
like what?
yeah.
Like I get that this is a comic book plot. Okay, but let's just gloss over this a little bit more because man,
What they really needed to do, I think, is the last episode or second to last episode is when they finally
yeah,
get
yeah,
to the island.
the island,
If they
yeah,
were going to do the intercut, they should have been on the island way sooner.
right, yep.
And I have no problem saying that was the weakest part
Yeah, yeah,
of
for
it,
sure. And then the
without a
second
doubt.
weakest with his daughter, but yeah,
Yeah, yeah. What I enjoyed about it is that intersection of you have the modern ideal,
yeah,
and then in postmodernism, there is no ideal.
hmm
It's basically, of course, there's an emphasis on the
he was like
individual.
struggling with that. He's like, no, this is the creed we live by,
Right.
and
Yeah.
we don't kill. And his son's like, well, that dude was about to, go thermonuclear and kill all of y'all. So I knocked his brains out with my fist.
Yeah, and of course, it's hard not to agree with him, even if you're kind of like trying to be sympathetic with the utopian.
You can see Superman struggling with that a little bit.
Right.
You part of me wants to believe you did the right thing, but also this oath has, or creed, whatever it's called,
Right.
the oath, whatever it is, has the code, dadgummit, has served me well for all these years and has been the guiding light of my life.
It's evidenced by the fact that there were a lot of people really upset at the end of Man of Steel that Superman just kills a guy.
Sure. This is the reckoning with that problem that the Snyderverse just doesn't do.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. This is playing out in real time, that struggle. Like why we have that struggle with the DC characters.
Yeah, sure.
Is because they do somewhat require that level of pureness to their piety needs to be somewhat complete,
needs to equal their power to some degree. They can't just be normal people,
right? But at the same time, no good deed goes unpunished. There has to be a way in which they suffer for it and also struggle with it and have questions about it and see that there's a lot of gray in this world, and it's like, how do we handle that? I mean, what do you do if you're so against killing somebody?
They're intent on killing you. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so
it was fun. His interview with when he was in therapy, quote unquote. And I guess at this point we've spoiled other things. It was the whole thing with the therapy is a fun twist.
Right.
I really enjoyed that. That was
right. Good. Yeah. I'll say another weakness of it is just the old age makeup in it is.
That's true. That the wigs were pretty in your face a little bit. Yeah.
Like it's technically good old age makeup. I know
it's just so obvious, especially between the flashbacks and knowing what Josh Duhamel looks like.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm saying, aside from that, if you can get past that, the acting in it is pretty solid, I think.
Yeah. I have no problem with that.
It's slow at times, and the focus is not on the superheroing.
Right. That's my problem. And I really, really, I really wanted his son to flick his hair out of his face. Very important. Yeah. That was really annoying me. No, I think that we're on the same page about it. It was a good show that was frustrating, very frustrating at times. It could have been better. But it did some really cool things that hadn't been done. Resonated, I think, in a way that that other stuff hasn't. So
I enjoyed enough about like the family relationship that was intriguing enough that when it wasn't superhero-y, I was intrigued by that. But I also do agree, at the same time, they could have, even outside of superheroing, they could have focused on some characters differently than they did, or at least I guess improved like the portrayal of the daughter. If they were going to focus on her so much, I did not find myself sympathizing with her.
Nope, not even a little bit.
Yeah, and they clearly wanted us to, and so I was like, well, we needed to have more than just like the short scene at the beginning where he flies off instead of getting them ice cream. Like that could have been like flashbacks to him, in the 90s or whatever when they're kids. And I promised I would be here, and just show him like continually failing as a father.
Right. Yeah. You needed to build that up a little bit more for sure. Right.
And then, maybe we would be a little more sympathetic when he seems to be trying really hard to do better.
And there's that scene where he's in bed with Miss whatever his wife, whatever the actress is. Anyway, and then he's like, I hear an asteroid around Mars. I've got a comment. I've got to go take care of that. Right. Like, oh, that couldn't have waited a minute, man.
Yeah. Like, that was actually one of the better episodes because the whole thing is he's gone, and so she has to deal with
what's going on Earth. Yeah,
right, and unfortunate things take place because he's not there. Anyway, it's intriguing. I wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't get picked up because, like you say, they throw so much stuff out there. But I would actually really like.
I think that I bet it'll get at least one more season.
Yeah, typically they,
especially given the ending. I mean, there was a twist cliffhanger ending, and
right. Oh yeah.
I don't know. I guess it was there. I didn't really. I need more information about why.
Yeah, I'll say I kind of. I don't want to be this guy because somebody did it to me recently about actually the Nevers with the twist in that one where they were like, yeah, I figured. And it's like, to me, the twist in that one is so out there.
Yeah.
But also kind of brilliant that I was like, what? How could you have seen that coming?
Right.
But I had a feeling about that twist. I'll just say that much.
I guess I just wasn't even like looking for a twist. So I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah,
I guess that works.
Yeah, I won't say I was looking for a twist. So I still was surprised, but they do a good job of giving you everything's wrapped up, and then it's like, oh wow,
not so much, yeah,
and
turn everything on its head.
Yeah. So, but yeah, that's part of the reason why.
And I wanted more of Skyfox Batman.
Yeah.
Skyfox is a weird name.
Right.
That just makes me think of Nintendo 64, Star Fox. But
yeah, it does.
But he was okay in the. I didn't like the flashbacks. I wanted him. I didn't like that he wasn't it.
That's again. I'd like to see a second season.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll focus a little bit less on flashbacks. Although I think we're still going to get flashbacks.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Maybe the flashbacks will be more interesting.
No, at least there'll be superheroes in them.
Right.
So that's something.
Right.
Won't be crazy on a quest to an island and have Lovecraftian overtones.
Yeah. So that's Jupiter's Legacy. You talked about Invincible. I watched the first couple of episodes and I did not like it, but it just didn't grab me.
Oh, fair enough. No, like the big twist at the end of I think it's the end of the first episode, the big battle and with the Guardians of the Globe, with the Justice League between them and Omni-Man, that's what grabbed me. I was like, oh, why is this happening? And so that I really liked that as a concept. And
I mean, I'm not saying it's bad. I'll give it another shot since you enjoyed it.
Yeah, no, I think it's worth it. I feel like it should have been live action. Like it's just, it's good material. J.K. Simmons.
Even I was kind of like, this feels not right as a animated show.
Yeah, totally. That's fair.
And I don't know if it was the animation style. I guess it reminds me a lot of like the 90s Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Style.
I get that.
J.K. Simmons, Omni-Man, actually looks kind of, ironically, like J. Jonah Jameson.
Yeah, he does. He really does.
From the 90s Spider-Man.
That's true. I'm sure that was slightly intentional, I would imagine.
I don't know. Yeah, well, I'll be sure to check that out.
It's funny how easy it is for us to fill up an hour talking about things other than Wheel of Time.
Well, that was why I knew. I mean, like that's why I was suggesting it. It was like I knew we could do that. No problem.
For sure. Especially with some of the stuff that's been coming out lately.
We've gotten kind of into the post-quarantine set of shows that kind of all are getting dumped out now.
Right. True.
It feels like stuff that got put on hold and they came back and finished it.
Right. Finished the last few shoots in post.
Right. And I think that's why we're getting so much stuff right now.
Mm-hmm.
As always, thanks guys for listening to our podcast. We'll end there for now. As I mentioned back at the start, we're now asking folks if they want to send us a donation to help support the podcast. You can visit tsmpodcast.com and click on that little yellow donate button at the top left. And this is going to help us keep the podcast going, help fund some of costs involved. If you have questions, comments, concerns, considerations, conflagrations or corrections, we talked about a lot of stuff here, and if you have thoughts about any of it, we'd love to hear it. If you're like, we hate off topic stuff, you can tell us that and we'll probably ignore it because I think we're going to try to do this at least once every few months, if not more going forward.
I keep having notes like written up for this, and then like don't use any of them. So
Right. If there's a show or book or nerd culture thing that you're like, hey, what do you guys think of this? Send that to us. And if we haven't checked it out yet, we'll check it out and we'll talk about it on one of our upcoming off-topic episodes. So yeah, you can find us on all the socials. That's would be a good place if you're wanting us to check a book or a show or a book or podcast or whatever it is. You can find us on Podcast TSM on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Say hello on our website, fill out our contact form, or emails at stuff@tsmpodcast.com. We'll be going into The Great Hunt, which, yes, we've already done, but we're kind of redoing it because the last time it was kind of spoilery and all over the place, and we're going to be doing a few episodes, I think at least 4 episodes on The Great Hunt. So look forward to jumping into that next week. Thanks again, and Tai'Shar Manetheren.